Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you here for our Going Global in Australia webinar, where we will be talking about all the things you need to know to expand your business into Australia. We'll be diving into the benefits of expanding into ShipBob's Australia Fulfillment Center and the requirements needed in order to store and ship your products locally in Australia. I'm excited to introduce the speakers for today's webinar. Jordan is joining from the ShipBob team. He is our manager of global sales and expansion. And Mani is the founder and director of our partner, Zonkeepers. We have a packed agenda today. Jordan will start us off talking about how to grow your business globally with ShipBob and the benefits of expanding into ShipBob Australia. We'll then pass the mic over to Mani, who will give you more information about Zonkeepers, how to get started shipping locally in Australia, and the rules and regulations required to do so. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jordan.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world today. We're looking to talk today about ShipBob Australia and going global. This is one of our series that we do, and we've done a few over the past 8 months, starting with the UK, EU, Canada, and now we're talking about all things Australia. So to give you a little bit of introduction about like what ShipBob is and who ShipBob is we are your trusted omni-fulfillment partner. We are a global logistics platform that fulfills e-commerce orders for D2C brands all across the globe. This time last year, we actually just launched Australia. So we're about a year old in Australia. We have other warehouses in Canada, European Union, Great Britain, Poland, and even one in Ireland, as well as our 25 plus fulfillment centers here in the United States. A good thing about ShipBob is no matter where you're in the world, we can fulfill your orders worldwide. This means that we can ship exports no matter which part of the globe you're in, going to anywhere in the world. That is something new that we've got done this summer. So it's very exciting for us and very excited for you as the merchant. So what it means to kind of go global. It's very important to think of your business outside of your domestic boundaries. A lot of consumers say having a local presence was a significant factor for brands when they shop. So previously we've talked about just doing exports, but today we're talking about being an in-country fulfillment and how like it being that present person inside of that country is important for you. The reason being it gives people in that country a domestic shipment option. No longer are they experiencing maybe paying duties and taxes and custom fees. And it also helps with reducing of carrier costs and transit times. Another thing that we've seen once you've been inside of a country fulfillment is also that we're going to see a reducement in cart abandonment. A lot of times a merchant's going to see that, or your customer is going to see that you're there domestically or locally for them. They're more likely to buy from you than going to another site. And then the next thing about it is we've all been hearing all this talk about a recession. This recession could be coming. We're all looking at our margins, trying to see where we can cut costs. Well, one way of not cutting costs and actually making more revenue, making additional sales, is opening up your website to the world, and then also opening up to a new market, such as Australia, as we're going to talk about today. So we kind of talked about this a little bit, cross-border without the complexities. We offer here at ShipBob a global network, connected technology, a local and tax and tariff compliance. And then really what it does is gives your merchant, your customer, a consistent shopper experience. So one of our main merchants that we like to spotlight here is the Adventure Challenge. They've gone with us globally, no matter where we've gone. And kind of one of the quotes that they've said. So while they're based in the US, a quarter of their sales are international. We are definitely using ShipBob's international fulfillment centers. We found out there is a consistent demand for our products abroad, and ShipBob's ever expanding global fulfillment network enables us to tap into that demand much more cost effectively. So kind of what we talked about today, like one way of opening up is opening up your website and having international orders, also called exports, ship out, but those can be very costly and then also can take a long time to make that delivery. So having that global international fulfillment or that global fulfillment in country helps you reduce costs and also reduce time in transit, as well as a better customer experience where there's not duties and taxes to worry about for your end merchant. So why ShipBob Australia? Why are we in Australia today? Well, Australia is a pretty big e-commerce market. At this point, it's expected to grow to 32.3 billion USD by 2024. So a huge market to tap into. 89% of e-commerce purchases in Australia will be domestic. So to hit that Australian market, a lot of those customers there are looking for something that's an in-country fulfillment when they purchase first. 89% is a huge number for that. And then finally, despite its relatively small population compared to other Asiatic neighbors, Australia is actually the 11th largest e-commerce market in the entire world. So there's a huge demand here in the Australian market, a huge e-commerce demand, and it's a great way to kick off your business in a market that you can similarly, if you're in the US-based merchant, the Canadian market's very similar to the US market. So it's a good opportunity to start your global expansion by looking at Australia as being one of those sites that you do too. Currently, we have an Australia website, ShipBob location in Melbourne, Australia, and one in Sydney coming very soon. If you look at the map, really in between those two little blue ShipBob logos, 80% of Australia's population really lies along that coast. The rest is outback territory until you get to Perth on the western side of Canada. But majority of the population lies within those two ShipBob logos, with 80% of it being there. So at this point, we're asking if you're ready to set up to sell in Australia. And if you aren't, that's okay. Because here today we have Mani, who's going to be able to help you get started with shipping within ShipBob Australia. Mani, I'll pass it over to you.
Good day, everyone. I am Mani from Zonkeepers, and we are an e-commerce accounting firm located here in the sunny Sunshine Coast, Queensland, Australia. While we work with businesses in Australia to expand globally into US, UK, Europe and other countries, but a significant part of our operations is to assist businesses located overseas to expand into the Australian market. And we can assist you with federal taxes and goods and services tax, GST, ABN registration, and anything and everything taxes, essentially. Before we move forward, just a quick disclaimer. Tax on legal matters are generally specific to the business and their operations. I will not recommend a blanket approach, so please feel free to reach out to me so that we can discuss your case specifically. All right. Let's get into it. About Australia. I've lived in Australia for 20 years now, and I love it. A country of 26 million people. We're not huge, but we are not tiny either. One thing that is important to note as a retailer is that although we are a big country in area, most of the population is concentrated on the eastern seaboard. And as we're an island, it takes us a while to catch on to things like shopping online. Like most developed countries, the pandemic supercharged e-commerce sales within Australia. And in 2020 and 2021, e-commerce had 21% growth year on year. So it's basically this section over here. But e-commerce in Australia still isn't at its peak by any means, and the next slide will show us just that. Even with pandemic growth, Australia is still lagging behind the other developed countries in frequency of online shopping. The red in graph shows frequency of households that shop online once a week, and in Australia we are at 25%. Far below US at, say, for example, 38%. The Australian e-commerce market is growing exponentially, and the potential for further growth is clear. So as a retailer, how do you go about selling in Australia? We'll start looking with, in a nutshell, to sell in Australia, you need an ABN, and you may or may not need to register for our sales tax, termed GST, goods and services tax. Let's spend a little bit of time understanding what ABN and GST are before going into detail about how, if you need to get registered and how to get registered and the filings and everything else. So what's an ABN? Australian business number. An ABN is a unique 11-digit number that identifies your business to the government and the community. You can use your ABN to be the importer of record when you import goods into Australia, essentially. Identify your business to others when ordering and invoicing, register for GST if need be, claim goods and services, GST tax credits, and I'll talk about that shortly. And get an Australian domain name, which is not commonly known. That in order to get a .com.au domain name, you may need an ABN. Now, you may already be selling into Australia without an ABN. As an overseas-based seller, the importer of record is the customer when selling one unit at a time. Now, this can cause problems, hold up at customs. The customer may be required to pay the GST duty tariffs before the goods are released. And most importantly, the way I see it is it's hard to scale your business. As Australia is a big island, that is, a long way away from anywhere, shipping can kill your profit margins. Now, let's take another example. When you bring, say, for example, your stock to Australia at ShipBob's warehouse, the importer of record needs to have an ABN. You may be liable for GST, we'll talk about it. But the biggest one is you save on shipping costs locally, and basically leads to greater customer experience. And that takes us to the next slide, and essentially in how do we go about getting an ABN. Unfortunately, the Australian Taxation Office, or ATO, I'll be referring them to moving forward, was set up in pre-internet world, and its systems for non-resident businesses aren't great. Their online application system is basic, and being a tech guy, I find their prehistoric systems incredibly frustrating. Basically, because you are a non-resident business, the tax office can't identify the directors with their Australian tax file numbers because you don't have one. In order to prove the identity of the company and the directors, the tax office needs 2 proof of identity documents. Moving forward, I'll be referring to them as POI, proof of identity documents. Now, for the director, it can basically be passport or a driver's license, which must be notarized by a notary public, any local, public notary local to you. In addition to proof of identity documents, the articles of incorporation listing the directors' names is also required. It also needs to be notarized. Generally, the rule is if any foreign document is being presented to the Australian government, let's get it notarized. These notarized copies, they need to be sent by mail. Yep, that is regular post, not email, to the Australian Taxation Office, and then be prepared to wait as the processing times are currently around 45 days compared to 28 days that they state on their website. I'm not sure what happens at the tax office, but it takes a minimum of 28 days, as they say. But realistically, as I said, it's taking 45 days essentially. And the kicker is, if there's a problem with your application, like you forgot the cover letter, or your documents have not been, they've been scanned with your iPhone, you can see the couch the paper was sitting on rather than just the page. Highly likely they will reject your ABN application. Or let's say your documents arrive after 43 days. They'll probably, because the information was not provided within the time frame, they'll probably reject you as well. There's no chance to amend your application. You just get to do it all over again. The whole process sounds pretty tough, and yes, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. We have a simple online form which takes around 5 minutes to fill out. You still need to get your documents notarized by a notary public, but we can check them first to make sure they've been done correctly. They've been notarized correctly and are likely to be accepted. Then rather posting them to the tax office by mail, you can jump on our website and upload your documents to our secure upload portal. We then file your application and compile the hard copies, sending them to the tax office in the correct format via a tracked postage. We take care of all the follow-ups on your application with the ATO to ensure it doesn't get lost. It still takes 40 to 50 to 45 days, but other than getting your documents notarized, all of your hard work is done by us. We've really tried to bring this process into the modern era as much as we can within the confines of the Australian taxation system. So moving on, let's say you have your ABN. What are your tax obligations? Quick summary, ABN basically is a business identification number, and the government uses it to track businesses and the tax liabilities of these businesses to make sure they get their taxes. Now, like most countries, our tax system is super complicated. There are over 125 different taxes in Australia, with over hundreds and thousands of pages of legislation, rulings, and case law. And as I said, it can be very complicated. Thankfully, Australia has tax treaties with most of the developed world. This makes our life much easier. Generally, this means if you are from a tax treaty country listed over here, it's not the full list, you take care of taxes for your company in the country that it has been incorporated in, and only pay sales tax and the GST in Australia. However, this assumes that you have no physical presence in Australia, such as an agent or a subsidiary or a permanent establishment. And we'll go into that into detail in a minute. You simply export goods to Australia, and you don't directly employ any staff in Australia. So assuming that your country has a tax treaty with Australia, you have no physical presence in Australia, and you don't employ any staff directly, you will need to register for an ABN, and you may be liable for GST. However, you miss out on income tax, superannuation, PAYG, withholding of FBT, and all heap of other fun taxes. In summary, every business needs an ABN to do business in Australia. When you're getting your identity documents together, remember your copies need to be notarized by a notary public, and there's lots of waiting for the tax office. But as I said, we can help you out with all of that. Now that we've established that every importer needs an ABN, now what about GST? We're going to review each of the following sections. What is GST? What your obligations are when you register for GST? Why you might choose to register for GST even though we're not legally required to, and the filing process. Goods and services tax in Australia is standard 10%, and there's two really important points regarding GST. The first one, that's actually a broad-based tax of 10% on most goods, services, and other items sold and consumed in Australia. And the second point is that GST registration is mandatory once your Australian sales connected with Australia, are more than 75,000 or equal to 75,000 Australian dollars in 12 months. Collected GST is remitted to the tax office on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis, depending on the business turnover. For overseas-based businesses, the main consideration when it comes to GST is that the Department of Human Affairs, Customs, also collects GST on taxable importations, which is 10% of the value of taxable importation, or VOTI, VOTI. This is relevant if you are importing a large amount, as if your goods have a value of, say, $50,000, the GST payable is $5,000, 5,000. So not an insignificant amount. Important to note, some product and services will never attract GST and are termed as GST free, like most basic foods and healthcare services, some education and medical aids. Generally, most of the things that are being sold online will attract GST. There's a full list of GST-free items available on the ATO website. If you need to, you can, in some cases, ask for the ATO to judge the GST status of your product via a private ruling. But again, as I said, highly likely, 90% of, maybe more than that, 95% of the items being sold online would attract GST. Another thing to note is that just because an item is on the GST-free list doesn't mean it's GST-free. If we look at walking sticks, for example, walking sticks on the left-hand side, that's GST-free. If they are a specialized walking stick designed for people with an illness or a disability. However, if it's a blow-up walking stick from a costume shop with no functional use and purely ornamental, then it will attract GST. So if you're registered for GST, you're obliged to charge GST on all of your sales to Australia, to Australian addresses, or basically sales connected to Australia. And at the end of the filing period, you submit your sales statement and remit your taxes to the Australian Tax Office. You can claim GST credits for any GST paid, and this also includes, so credits include GST on expenses incurred in Australia, example, printing on demand in Australia, and then GST on imports. So each filing period, your GST equation looks like this. GST collected on sales less GST credit on expenses less GST paid on imports is the net GST payable. Now you could also end up in some cases in a refund position. Just remember, and it's very important, if you are registered for GST, you cannot cancel your GST registration within 12 months of registering. Now, this is a very frequently asked question. When selling online, who is responsible for collecting GST? Many of you would be aware that Amazon launched in Australia a couple of years ago, and it really has just exploded in Australia. But with Australia's GST laws, how you sell is not as important as the origin of the shipment when determining if you need to charge GST or not. And we'll discuss this in depth now. Now, let's say if it's your own website. Now, it can be a Shopify, WooCommerce, or a BigCommerce site. Generally, you are always responsible for monitoring your sales, and when reaching the threshold, registering and then collecting GST and then remitting GST. However, as I said before, when selling on a marketplace, it really depends on the origin of the shipment. Posted from within Australia by utilizing FBA, you are responsible for collecting the GST. However, post your product to consumer from outside Australia, GST falls on the marketplace facilitator. Okay? So for marketplaces, when we consider the origin of stock, this is how you break down the GST obligations. Your website, you are responsible on the left. And for marketplaces, if you ship your product from Australia, you collect the GST, or basically you need to monitor your sales. if you're shipping, and if you're shipping the product from overseas, the marketplace will essentially, in most 99% of the cases, collect and remit GST on your on all the goods and on your behalf, and basically, yeah. So remember, this is important. If that's in this scenario, build GST into your pricing, because it's tax on sales, not profit. Very important. Now, if your sales are less than 75,000, you've got two options. Your first option is to put it in the too hard basket. Don't register for GST. There is no regular filing obligations. It's less paperwork and less hassle. You will need to continue to monitor your sales in Australia, and when they have reached the threshold more than 75,000 in rolling 12-month period, you must register for GST. You will still pay GST on imports, which is the 10% of VOTI, valuable taxable value of taxable imports, and you cannot claim this back as a credit. Your second option is to voluntarily register for GST. This is a good idea if you have a very high value import on its way. Let's use a fictional character, Sarah. Now, Sarah has been selling online, selling individual products from stock in the US. In this setup, the customer is the importer of record. So Sarah is trading without an ABN. Her Australian sales are just starting to take off, but shipping fees are killing her profit margins. Sarah decides she needs to get stock into ShipBob's warehouse in Australia, and Sarah's company will now be the importer of record. So Sarah needs to get her company an ABN to move her stock into the into ShipBob's warehouse. Now, Sarah's company is under 75,000 annually in sales, so she doesn't have to register for GST, but she might decide to before she has a big import coming in. Again, same example. That's Sarah's container over there. On this container with $50,000 worth of stock in it at customs, Sarah's going to pay 10% of the value of that stock on import, and this is called GST on imports, and that's $5,000. Now, if she's registered for GST, when the stock arrives, that goes straight to the Australian tax office, Australian government. However, if she's registered for GST, if she's not registered for GST, this stock arrives and she pays GST, and that goes to the Australian government. However, if she is registered for GST, she can claim that $5,000 back in her next GST filing. So don't miss out on a refund if you have a big import coming. To put it in perspective, let's look at the equation over here again. Let's revisit the equation. It's the GST you collected in sales less the expenses less the imports is equal to GST payable, right? Now, in Sarah's case, if her sales price per unit is $50, let's say, once she registers for GST, she has to start charging straight away on GST on sales. So her sale price is now 50 plus 5, that 10% of GST, yeah, $55 a unit, where $50 is her revenue and $5 is the GST collected. If during her first filing period she sold 100 units, let's say, she would have collected $500 in GST. It's $500. So 500, yeah, 500 units, $5 GST collected, so 500 in GST. Typically, for overseas-based businesses, locally incurred expense, they don't really have many locally incurred expenses. Let's say you had $50 worth of GST in local expenses, so you can claim that as well. But remember, we paid $5,000 on imports. So the final equation basically ends up with a $4,550 refund. Now, it's great outcome. Now, before you think of it, remember, you must maintain your GST registration for at least 12 months. So the next period, you will have to remit your GST. Most likely, you'll be in a payable position. My point is, you always have to pay GST on imports. So if there's an opportunity to claim it back for big imports, it can be well worth the effort to register for GST earlier than required. So our aim is to make your life make life simpler for you. As a business owner, focus on your business and let us do the rest. We can take care of your GST filings. Simply send us all your Australian sales reports for the period. And in most of the cases, if you're selling via Shopify, WooCommerce, or any of those stores, we can grab all the data ourselves. Send us the receipts of any expenses incurred during this time, any imports documentation for GST on imports. We'll calculate the GST obligation or refund. We will do compile the paperwork, get it prepared, and let you know. Send it to you for basically review and sign it, and then we'll file it for you with the tax office. So, as I said, our aim is really to make your life as simple as possible. And our fees to take care of all your GST compliance is billed at $83 a month or $249 a quarter for one shop front, and add $27 extra per extra sales channel. For example, Shopify and eBay, that's 2 sales channels. So in summary, everyone needs an ABN if you are importing into Australia. Our fees for taking care of your ABN application is $390 and that's a one-off fee. In regards to GST, if Australian sales is more than 75,000 in 12 months, you must register for GST. And if it's less than 75,000 Australian dollars in 12 months, it's not essential to register for GST, although you may still choose to voluntarily register for GST. If you're not sure about your individual circumstances, please reach out for a complimentary call to see what options are best for you. As a special offer for ShipBob customers, if you register for GST, we'll take care of your ABN for you. You'll still need to get your documents notarized, but we'll do all the heavy lifting for you for your ABN, and then take care of your GST filings every quarter. So that's a saving of $390. It's not an offer which it's not something which I've offered before, and highly unlikely I'll be offering something similar again. It's valid till September 2022. If you have any questions, please reach out using the link over there. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and please reach out if you have any questions, and I look forward to working with you guys. Have a good day. Cheers.